Hello, my name is Maria and this is Matty, my mascot. In this lesson we are gonna compare fractions. Try to find out which fraction is greater. But first, before we get into comparing, we're gonna just review something important, which is, here I have one whole circle, but I divide it into two parts, and both parts are colored. What fraction is it therefore? I wrote here 1 because it's one whole, but we can also write it as a fraction. And since there are two parts, then it is 2 there, and since 2 are colored, 2 here too. And we read it as 2 halves. How about here? There's one whole rectangle. And how do we write it as a fraction? As you can see, 3 parts in total, 3 are colored, and we read it as 3/3. And over here we get to comparing fractions, which is kind of fun because you get to color. Okay, what fraction is this? 2/3. And that means I would color 2 of these parts here. And over here we have 1/2, so I color 1 part. And now we compare which is greater. Which is more pie to eat, so to speak? You can think of it as a pie, you know? And so you see, oh, this is more, right? So the alligator mouth goes that way. Over here, 2/3, and what fraction is this? 3/4. So I need to color again. 2/3 and 3/4. And which one is more chocolate bar to eat? You can see over here, this one is a little higher, so that's the greater fraction. Over here we compare 1/3, 1/2. You wanna guess which one will be the greater fraction? And once you have your guess, now I'm gonna have to divide this here into 3 parts and this here into 2 parts. Like that. And then this one I could divide it this way or this way. But can you see which one will be easier way so we can compare? If I divide it this way, it might not be as easy, so I'll divide it kind of the same way with vertical lines. Now it's time to color. Okay, Matthew, okay, I'll let you color. He's anxious to color too. Sure enough, 1/3, yeah, and then over here, 1/2. Color 1/2, Matthew. Good job. Now, which one is more? This one, of course, so 1/2 is the greater fraction. Notice though that this number 2 is actually the smaller number than the number 3. But it actually tells us into how many parts we are dividing our shape. And so this 1/2 is still, it's more to eat than this. 2/4 and 2 halves. Look at this. Have we seen something like this in this lesson already? Over here, 2 halves is the same as the whole pie, isn't it? So I would color the whole pie. Here, I won't color the whole pie. So I can save some time and just tell that this is the greater fraction, right? That's the whole pie. This would be, you know, if I divide it into 4ths and then color 2. Let's go on. Over here. Well, Matty, go back. How many parts is this pie divided into? 6 parts. So each part is a 1/6. 1/6. And let's say that I color a few. Oh, Matty wants to color again? Well, soon, Matty, soon, Matty. I'll color this time. I colored 3 of those 1/6. So I write a fraction. 3/6. And then over here, it's divided into 5 parts. So each part is a 1/5. And Matthew, yeah, I'll let you color this time. Okay. Okay. So what fraction is colored by Matthew? 2 parts are colored, 5 in total. 2/5. Oh, here's some more coloring to do. Matthew, come down again. Color this one. 3/5. Fractions are so much fun because you get to color so much. Now it's my turn. What fraction is this? 1/6. So I need to first divide this thing into 6 parts, which, let's say I first divide it into 2 parts, like that. And then I go this ways, 2 lines, like that. And then color 1. Over here, 5/5. Actually, that's gonna be the whole rectangle, 1 whole. But I need to still divide it into 5 parts and color 5, so let's try. Oops, those didn't end up being equal parts. Okay, they should have been. So I didn't do a perfect job of dividing it, but I'll color the whole thing anyway. Lastly, we get to compare again which fraction is greater. Wanna guess? 3/6 and 1/2. Okay, the 1/2 is already there. Just color it in. And now 3/6. First of all, I will divide this in half, and then with 2 lines like that. Now I will color 3/6. I'll color these 3. Of course, you can color any 3 pieces, but for comparing, this makes it easier. Can you see which one is more? You know, this time they are equal. Right? It's the same amount of chocolate bar to eat, this way or that way. Lastly, again, make a guess. Which fraction is greater? Which part is more to eat? Okay, I'll let you color one more time. 3/5. That much, and 3/4. That much. You can see easily which one is more. It is the 3/4. Okay, was it a surprise? Anyway.
What we want to do is we want to look at some problems that would look something like this. If you had 1/6 and you were dividing by 1/2, okay? 1/6 divided by 1/2. Well, let's rewrite that a little bit and I'll show you what they're really asking. You have 1/6, which is just a number, don't forget, and I'm dividing by, which is what this big bar means, I'm dividing by 1/2, okay? So here I've got 1/6 divided by 1/2. Here I've got 1/6 divided by 1/2. I'm just showing you what they're really asking you to do. I'm kind of writing it in a different form, okay? 1/6 divided by 1/2, okay? The way in which you do division of fractions is very, very simple. You just take the top number, 1/6, and you change this division, which is this big line here, into multiplication. But when you do that, so you change it into multiplication, so you put a big dot here, that means multiplication. But you're not going to multiply by 1/2, you're going to multiply and you're going to flip this fraction over. So you're going to multiply by 2/1, okay? Now I know that may not make a whole lot of sense, but that's really what you're doing. We'll go back and talk about this part in a minute. Let's go ahead and finish the problem. Now that it's a simple multiplication problem, you just multiply the top two numbers. 1 times 2 gives you 2. And the bottom two numbers, 6 times 1 gives you 6. And then just like any problem with anything, you always check and see if you can simplify it. And here you can, because you can divide by 2 and you can divide by 2. Okay? 2 divided by 2 is going to give you 1. 6 divided by 2 is going to give you 3. Okay? So that's the answer, 1/3. Notice that from here on, it was just a simple multiplication problem. You just multiply the top, multiply the bottom, simplify the fraction, and that's it. The only thing that you need to know here is when you're dividing, okay, you take the top number, and then you change this division into a multiplication, and then you take the bottom fraction and you flip it over, which is what we did here. 1/2 became 2/1, and then you can multiply them. So you see, division and multiplication are kind of almost opposites of one another, and they're almost exactly the same. And once you start, okay, with the division, you can change it into multiplication by taking that bottom fraction and flipping it over. And
here is a picture of a square. This square has been divided in half. 1/2 is coloured in and the other half is white. The important thing is that each half is the same size. What is a quarter? A quarter is when a shape or a set is divided into 4 equal parts. You might see a quarter written like this. The bottom part of this shows me how many parts the shape is divided into. Here is a picture of a circle. This circle has been divided into quarters. Each piece is the same size. This piece here is 1/4. Here is a cake. This cake has been cut into quarters. There are 4 pieces and each piece is the same size. Here are some pictures of halves. Here is some chocolate. It's been divided into half. This is half of the chocolate. Here is a square. It's been divided into 2 parts and each part is the same size. This is 1/2 of the square. Here is a triangle. It's been cut into 2 pieces. Each piece is the same size and this is 1/2. Here is a circle. It's been cut into half. This is 1/2 of the circle. And here's another square. This one's been cut going this way. Each piece is the same size and this is 1/2 of the square. And here are some pictures that show quarters. Here, this rectangle has been divided into 4 even parts and each part is the same size. This coloured in bit shows 1/4. Here, a diamond has been cut into 4 even parts and this piece shows 1/4. This is a circle. It's been divided into 4 equal parts. And here's a pizza that's been cut into 4 equal parts and each piece is the same size. That's 1/4.
Hi boys and girls, today we're going to be learning about ordering fractions. So there's a few things you need to remember as soon as you look at a problem to see what steps you need to take first. If the denominator is the same in all of the fractions, then all you need to do is look at the numerators and order them depending on however they tell you to order them. But if the denominators are different, you need to do a few extra steps first. You need to create equivalent fractions and then you can order them based on the numbers in the numerator. So let's take a look at some examples. Example number 1, we have 2/3, 3/3, and 1/3. What you notice about these fractions is they all have the same denominator. So we're only going to be focused on the numerator. My problem tells me to order the fractions from least to greatest. So I need to be looking for the smallest numerator that I see. So out of 2, 3, and 1, the smallest number would be the 1, which makes 1/3 the smallest fraction. Then I would look for the next one, and the 2 would come next, which makes 2/3. And finally, the 3, which makes 3/3 my greatest fraction. So to order these fractions from least to greatest, I would have 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. Seems pretty simple when the denominator is the same. However, you will be seeing a lot of problems like this: 1/4, 1/2, and 1/5. How do we order them when the denominators are different? Well, you need to create equivalent fractions first, and that takes a little time and a little bit of work. First, you need to rewrite your fractions. And as we've done in previous lessons, you need to be looking at the denominators and focus on those numbers. Our goal is to find a denominator that we can use for all of those fractions that's exactly the same. And the way we find that is by listing out each of the times tables for each denominator and finding a number that they have in common. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, I'm going to list my 4 times table. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. I'm going to go ahead and list my 2 times table. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And my 5 times table. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I then need to search all of my multiples for each of the denominators to find the first number that they have in common. So for this set of numbers, it looks like the very first number they share, all three of them share, is 20. So 20 is going to become my new denominator for all three fractions. All right, then I need to use my equivalent fraction skills to create the numerators for each of those fractions. And I do that by multiplying. I ask myself, how does 5 become 20? Well, 5 times 4 equals 20. Whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator as well. So I must also multiply my numerator by 4. And 1 times 4 equals 4. Same thing over here. I ask myself, how do I get from 2 to 20? I multiply by 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. So 1 times 10 equals 10. And finally, how do I get from 4 to 20? I multiply by 5. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 1 times 5 equals 5. So now instead of 1/4, I have 5 20ths. Instead of 1/2, I have 10 20ths. And instead of 1/5, I have 4 20ths. Now I'm able to order those numbers from least to greatest. So out of these numbers, my smallest numerator is the 4, which tells me that 1/5 is the smallest fraction. After that, my next smallest numerator would be the 5, which tells me that 1/4 would come next. And finally, my 10, which tells me that 1/2 would be the greatest fraction. All right, so that would be how you would solve a problem where the denominators are different. Let's try one more example before I set you off to try your practice problems. We have 3/8, 2/3, and 3/4. Now we're trying to create equivalent fractions where the denominators are all the same. So we're going to go ahead and list the 8 times table. 8, 16, 24, 32. The 3 times table. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, and the 4 times table. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Then we search our multiples to try to find the first number that all three have in common. And it looks as if 24 is the first number that every single denominator has in common. So 24 is going to become my new denominator. Now I create my equivalent fractions. I ask myself, how do I get from 8 to 24? Well, we multiply by 3. Whatever I do to one number, I must do to the other. And 3 times 3 equals 9. How do I get from 3 to 24? I multiply by 8. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. And 2 times 8 is 16. And how do I get from 4 to 24? I multiply by 6, do the same to the top, and get 18. So now instead of 3/8, I have 9 24ths. Instead of 2/3, I have 16 24ths. And instead of 3/4, I have 18 24ths. My denominators are now all the same, and I can just focus on my numerators. My problem asked me to order from least to greatest, so I searched for my smallest numerator, which is the 9. And that tells me that 3/8 is the smallest fraction. After that, it looks as if my next smallest is 2/3, which is the 16 as the numerator. So that tells me 2/3 comes next. And finally, my 18 as the numerator, which tells me that 3/4 comes last. All right. time for you to practice some problems on your own. Please do these in box number 3 of your homework sheet. We have 3/8, 3/6, and 3/10, 5/9, 5/6, and 1/3, and 2/7, 3/7, and 1/7. Please make sure that you are taking your time and staying organized so that you can see the relationship between your fractions. And the directions ask you to order from least to greatest. And for box number 4, I would like you to create 3 of your own fractions and order them from least to greatest as well. And boys and girls, if you still have questions or comments or strategies, please be sure to put them in box number 4 of your homework sheet, and we'll discuss them in class tomorrow. You've been flipped with Mrs. Manafo.